Hello and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to address a comment that I got about how I use AI when I run my own business as somebody with ADHD, which is, a really dangerous combination. Totally in charge of my own schedule, and I am totally in charge of my own schedule. The good news is that AI has helped me be more productive in the last several months than I think I've ever been before. The bad news is that you still have to do the work. Let me share a real example of what I did one day when I was really struggling to prioritize the many different projects that I have on my list. So, the way that I've found for AI to really help me is by doing the work first. So, basically, what I do when I'm really struggling is I take all of that monthly planning that I do. This is in my last video, which I'll link here, about my goals for October. And I just literally paste it into AI, into Claude. I like Claude because it has a lot of ethical concerns behind it and it tends to be nice to me. I know it's a machine, it shouldn't matter, but Claude is like, "Oh, you're right," or "Thank you for providing this to me," and it makes me happy. Anyway, below that, for AI, the cool thing about it is it doesn't matter what order you do it in. It doesn't care. It's a computer. And then I'm like, these are the things that I have on my list for today. And I'm like, based on what input I give you that I already decided matters to me and my list, what should I do first? I find the best prompts are really long. Like I said, Claude's so nice. Thank you for sharing your detailed monthly planning. It just makes me happy. Anyway, what I tend to do is I ask, and what Claude does is like, okay, based on your deadlines, based on what you have committed, here's your priority order. You have to give a webinar in 2 days. Maybe you should finish that. And I know it's silly to need to externalize that, but as somebody with ADHD, like telling myself it's important, I don't listen to myself. I know it's important. That's great. And I'm not going to do anything with that information. So it helps me set my goals. And then it went on to talk about for your broader October priorities, I suggest focusing on these, which really was just reiterating to me what I already said. And I actually still find that helpful because it's not in my voice and it's reminding me you said these were your priorities, so you should do them. I like that Claude, especially. I don't work much with ChatGPT. I think it honestly, I got annoyed with how rarely I could get into it at first, but the user interface for Claude, all of the things that Anthropic has done to make it into something that feels a little bit more ethical. I actually asked Claude one day, I'm like, hey, if I give you like my story idea or I give you this prompt, are you going to use that to train yourself? And it responded with no, and here's a link to my terms and conditions. And so that actually makes me feel better when I do get stuck on something creative. I feel better asking Claude to help me because I don't feel like it's going to be used then to help somebody else, which is great. Then from there, I'm like, thank you for this help. I did the webinar. I'm tired. I can't focus. Where should I switch my attention to? Knowing I have to come back to do this next part eventually, but I'm struggling now. Using the information that I gave already with this huge priority list, Claude went through and said, okay, what if you tried to do these? And then reminded me it's okay to work in shorter bursts. It's if you struggle with focus, take a break. Do something less demanding, like organizing materials for the edit, which I've already done, so I couldn't do that. And I like how it says, the key is to remain productive while also respecting your current energy levels. Don't push yourself too hard. And I find this really useful. Let me go ahead and find a different example really quick of something that I've done creatively where, again, I feed Claude my standards and then ask it to judge my work based on my standards. Okay, so I'm not going to go over this in a lot of detail because this is the longest conversation I have ever had with AI. I had it at like midnight when all of my friends were asleep. But I want to show a little bit here about how I fed Claude my own standards before asking it a question. So I was struggling with a character. I needed to come up with a new job for her. And I wanted to like make sure that my story was passing the Bechdel test. I didn't want her arc to be about a man. It wasn't interesting to me. So like here are the parameters. I have this character. Here are these different things that are happening. Here's the romance. There are some of the things that I already know. based on that information, can you give me 5 ideas for a backstory, a want, and a character change? And it gave me 5 ideas. I didn't love each of them, and they were already in my story. So I'm like, okay, let's avoid those. So we got some more ideas. I go in and I'm like, this is the theme of the whole show. Additionally, I need to make sure her backstory and her trauma make dating a famous person a negative revelation. Are any of these relevant to the situations we've discussed? And then I tried to get help writing a song, and honestly, I don't think Claude's very good at that yet, so we're not even going to look at it. But anyway, that's one of the ways that I've used it creatively. I didn't end up using any of the ideas it gave me exactly as it was on the page. What I used Claude for was, well, I've had this character for 6 years. She's been a certain person in my mind that wasn't working on the page. I needed to get out of my own head. In creative contexts, I use AI as a really, really, really sophisticated prompt generator. Actually, sometimes I use it as a like not specific prompt generator too. I'm like, give me 30 nouns and 30 adjectives. I need to write some metaphors for my songwriting class. And then I'll combine those 30 nouns and adjectives myself, but it's just a prompt generator in that respect, right? But in this case, I have fed it things like my own standards. I need to write a character change that has nothing to do with a man, and I need to ensure that the job that I choose for her is going to influence her love interest, it's going to influence herself, but she will also have a reason to be at the music festival where the second act of my musical takes place that has nothing to do with him, because I don't want to write a character whose only ambition in life is to meet her crush. Essentially, what I've done when it comes to using AI is I use AI for two main things: to meet my own standards and to get out of my own way. I feed it my priorities. I feed it my understanding of how a story works or how an article works. Sometimes I will give it, here's an article. I don't feel like my conclusion is there yet. What am I missing? And it will tell me what I'm missing, and I will take and leave advice based on what I feel like is relevant to my article. But writing conclusions is not one of my strong points. It's like, oh, you forgot to tie everything back together at the end related to point two. Oh, right, I could add that in. But I find it especially useful in combination with the work that I do, planning my months, deciding what my priorities are, deciding what I might need to change, feeding that into AI, saying, this is what I want to be doing. Here are all the things on my mind. Can you synthesize these for me and remind me what I need to do next? It gets me out of that paralysis that can happen with ADHD when you have too much to do, or when you aren't sure what you want to do because your interest is being pulled in so many different directions. And I feed it my own standards for writing for my own work. I've never used this for a client, it is for myself. When I'm stuck, I feed it my own standards, I feed it my own parameters, usually really specific ones that I couldn't do with like a fantasy name generator. Like, I've used those before. This feels like just the next step in that. One of the ways that I judge stories is on the ability of being able to answer, what choice does the character make at the end of the story they were incapable of making at the beginning? I need to make sure that what I choose follows this arc. Here are all of these parameters. What can I do with that? And it feels like a way to really access my own brain externally, not, or to process my own brain externally. I feed it my own ideas, I feed it my own priorities, and it reminds me what I already said. It's kind of like talking to a therapist. Like, I wouldn't use it for therapy. That's not a great idea. Don't do that, especially on one that is still training on the information that you feed it. Don't feed it your therapy. But when I talk to a therapist, usually what happens is a therapist will tell me what I just said, and they'll tell me what I just said in a way that makes me realize what it is that I really want. And that's how I use AI. I tell it everything I'm thinking, and it responds with what I just said and reminds me what my own priorities are and then what I should do based on that information. I hope you find this useful. How do you use AI? I am always looking for new ways to improve my workflow, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, and if you think this is a reasonable use of it, like as a personal assistant. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.